The weight of failure sat on his chest every morning before his eyes even opened. It was not loud or dramatic, it was quiet, heavy, and constant. He lay in bed staring at the cracked ceiling, listening to the ceiling fan struggle above him, its uneven sound mirroring the chaos in his mind. Once, he had believed he was meant for something more. Now, that belief felt childish, almost embarrassing. Bills were stacked on the small table in the corner, unopened but fully understood. Each envelope carried the same message: "You are falling behind." He moved through his days like a man underwater. At work, his shoulders stayed hunched, his eyes avoiding everyone else's. Every small mistake felt magnified, as if the world was waiting for proof that he was exactly what he feared he was, not enough. When his manager spoke, he nodded even when the words blurred together. Inside, frustration burned, but it had nowhere to go. Speaking up felt dangerous. Trying again felt pointless. Failure had trained him to expect disappointment. At night, the silence was worse. That was when memories returned uninvited. He remembered the excitement he once had, the plans he shared confidently, the way people used to listen when he spoke about his dreams. Somewhere along the way, those dreams had been replaced by survival. He scrolled through his phone, watching others succeed, smile, and move forward, while he felt stuck in the same place, day after day. Jealousy mixed with shame, and he hated himself for both. One evening, after another long day that ended with nothing accomplished, he sat alone on the edge of his bed. His hands trembled slightly as he stared at them, rough and tired. A question rose in his mind, quiet but sharp: is this really all I am capable of? The thought scared him because part of him believed the answer might be yes. His chest tightened, and for a moment, he felt close to breaking, but beneath the exhaustion and self-doubt, something small refused to disappear. It was not hope in its usual bright form. It was more like a stubborn spark, dim but alive. He realized that while he had failed many times, he had never truly understood why. He had been running, reacting, blaming circumstances, and numbing himself to the pain, but he had never stopped to learn from it. That realization unsettled him. As he sat there, a strange mix of emotions washed over him: regret for wasted time, anger at himself, and a quiet curiosity about what might happen if he tried to understand his failures instead of fighting them. For the first time in a long while, the idea of learning did not feel like a burden. It felt like a doorway. He took a slow, deep breath. Nothing in his life changed in that moment. The bills were still there. The fear was still real. But inside him, something shifted. Failure no longer felt like a final judgment. It felt like a message he had ignored for too long. And as he lay back down, staring at the same cracked ceiling, his heart carried a new, fragile emotion: determination mixed with humility. He did not know the solution yet, but he knew one thing clearly: continuing the same way was no longer an option. The next morning did not arrive with motivation or confidence. It arrived quietly, almost indifferently, as if nothing inside him had changed at all. The alarm rang, and for a few seconds he considered turning it off and sinking back into sleep. That familiar urge whispered that effort would only lead to disappointment. But he remembered the thought from the night before, the idea that failure was trying to teach him something. That memory did not energize him, yet it steadied him just enough to sit up. He started small, not because he felt disciplined, but because anything bigger felt impossible. Instead of rushing through his routine on autopilot, he slowed down. He noticed how tense his jaw was, how shallow his breathing had become over the years. As he washed his face, he looked at his reflection without judgment for once. The tired eyes staring back at him did not look lazy or weak. They looked worn. That distinction mattered more than he expected. On his way to work, he resisted the urge to drown his thoughts in noise. No music, no endless scrolling. Just the sound of traffic and his own mind. Patterns began to surface. He realized how often he avoided difficult tasks until they became emergencies, how fear of doing something imperfect had stopped him from doing anything at all. The realization stung, but it also felt honest. For the first time, he was not blaming bad luck or other people. He was paying attention. At work, he tried something unfamiliar. When confusion appeared, he did not hide it. He asked a simple question, his voice low but steady. Nothing dramatic happened. No one mocked him. No disaster followed. The world did not collapse. That small moment surprised him more than success ever had. It showed him how much energy he had wasted protecting his pride instead of building his skills. Later that day, he wrote things down. Not goals, not dreams, just facts. What went wrong? Where he felt afraid. What he avoided. Seeing his failures on paper stripped them of some of their power. They were no longer an overwhelming blur, they were specific, understandable, and human. With each line, the tightness in his chest eased slightly. That evening, instead of numbing himself with distraction, he read and listened. He searched for people who had failed openly and survived it. Their stories did not promise instant success. They spoke about patience, repetition, and discomfort. It was not inspiring in a cinematic way, but it felt real. He began to understand that learning was not about sudden breakthroughs. It was about staying present when things felt uncomfortable. As night settled in, fatigue returned, but it was different this time. It came with a quiet sense of progress. He had not fixed his life. He had not escaped failure. But he had taken responsibility for understanding it. Lying in bed, he felt a cautious sense of respect for himself, something he had not felt in a long time. Failure was still there, but it no longer felt like an enemy. It felt like a teacher he had finally decided to listen to. The days that followed tested his resolve in ways he did not expect. Learning was not clean or motivating, it was frustrating and slow. There were moments when old habits pulled at him, urging him to quit early or distract himself the moment discomfort appeared. Each time he stumbled, the familiar voice of self-criticism returned, sharp and convincing. The difference now was that he noticed it. Instead of obeying it, he paused and asked himself what he was avoiding. He began breaking his work into pieces so small they almost felt meaningless. One email. One page. One decision. Progress felt embarrassingly slow, and part of him hated that. He wanted proof that he was changing, something visible and impressive. But reality offered something quieter, consistency. Showing up daily, even without confidence, slowly rebuilt trust with himself. That trust mattered more than speed. Emotionally, the journey was uneven. Some mornings he woke with a sense of purpose, other days he felt the same heaviness he thought he had escaped. When mistakes happened, they hurt just as much as before. The difference was what came after. Instead of spiraling into shame, he forced himself to ask one simple question: what can this teach me? Sometimes the answer was practical. Sometimes it was uncomfortable, revealing a weakness he would rather ignore. Either way, he wrote it down. People around him began to notice small changes before he did. He listened more carefully. He reacted less defensively. When feedback came, his chest still tightened, but he no longer shut down. He treated criticism as information, not a verdict on his worth. That shift was subtle, but it changed how others responded to him. Conversations felt less tense, more honest. One evening, after a particularly difficult day, he almost gave up. A mistake had undone hours of effort, and frustration boiled over. His hands shook as he sat alone, anger mixing with exhaustion. For a moment, he felt the old despair closing in, telling him this path was pointless. He closed his eyes and breathed slowly, reminding himself that learning included setbacks. Walking away would only return him to the same place he had sworn to leave. As he calmed down, a deeper realization surfaced. Failure had never been the real problem. His relationship with it was. He had treated mistakes as proof that he should stop, rather than signals guiding him forward. Understanding this did not erase the pain, but it gave it meaning. Pain became part of the process, not a sign of defeat. That night, as he reviewed his notes, he felt something unfamiliar: quiet confidence. Not the loud kind that demands attention, but the steady kind that grows from effort repeated over time. He still did not know where this path would lead. But for the first time, uncertainty did not terrify him. It challenged him. And in that challenge, he felt himself slowly becoming stronger. Time did not reward him suddenly. There was no dramatic moment where everything fell into place, no applause, no instant relief. Instead, change arrived quietly, layered day by day, almost invisible unless he looked back carefully. Weeks turned into months, and during that time, he continued doing the unremarkable work of learning, correcting, and trying again. Many days still felt ordinary. Some felt heavy. But none felt meaningless anymore. He began to notice how his inner voice had changed. It was still there, but it no longer attacked him with the same cruelty. When he failed, the voice asked questions instead of delivering insults. Why did this happen? What was missing? What could be done differently next time? That shift alone changed how he carried himself. His posture straightened slightly. His gaze lifted. He no longer walked through life bracing for impact. Challenges continued to appear, but they no longer felt personal. When something went wrong, he felt frustration, even disappointment, but not the crushing shame that once followed him everywhere. He understood now that effort did not guarantee success every time, but avoiding effort guaranteed failure. That truth settled deeply inside him, shaping his decisions in quiet, powerful ways. One afternoon, he caught himself explaining a concept to someone else, patiently and clearly. The realization startled him. He was no longer just consuming information, he was applying it. Teaching it. That moment filled him with a restrained pride, not loud or boastful, but grounding. It was proof that growth had taken place, even if it had been slow and uncomfortable. His environment began to respond to him differently. Opportunities appeared, not because luck suddenly favored him, but because he was finally prepared to recognize and act on them. When responsibility came his way, fear still surfaced, but it no longer paralyzed him. He accepted challenges with caution, knowing he might stumble, but trusting himself to learn if he did. Late one night, he sat alone again, much like he had months earlier. The room was the same. The ceiling still carried its cracks. The bills still existed, though fewer now, more manageable. But the man sitting there was not the same. He reflected on how close he had come to giving up, how many times he had mistaken confusion for incapability and exhaustion for weakness. Understanding this filled him with compassion for his past self. He realized something important then. Learning had not just improved his skills, it had restored his dignity. Failure no longer defined him. It informed him. It shaped him. It sharpened his awareness and softened his judgment. Through learning, he had reclaimed control over his direction. Even when outcomes remained uncertain, there were still moments of doubt. He accepted that now. Doubt no longer felt like an enemy to eliminate, but a signal to slow down and pay attention. When setbacks occurred, he allowed himself to feel disappointment without letting it turn into despair. Resilience, he discovered, was not about being unbreakable. It was about recovering more honestly each time. As he lay down to rest, a quiet gratitude filled his chest. Not gratitude for success, because he knew success was still unfolding, still fragile. Gratitude for the lesson that had changed everything, that failure was not the opposite of progress, but part of it. Learning had taught him patience with himself, and patience had taught him persistence. He no longer chased the version of himself who never failed. That version had been an illusion, a heavy standard that had crushed his confidence. Instead, he committed to becoming someone who failed forward, who listened closely, who adjusted and continued. That commitment felt solid, something he could stand on even when the ground shifted. In the end, his life did not transform because he became fearless or exceptionally talented. It transformed because he learned how to stay present when things were difficult, how to extract meaning from mistakes, and how to keep going without certainty. That knowledge did not erase struggle, but it gave him direction. As sleep finally took him, his breathing was calm, steady. Tomorrow would bring its own problems, its own tests. But for the first time in a long while, he welcomed them, not as threats, but as lessons waiting to be learned.